The Emperor Augustus, just before Jesus was born, was concerned that too few legitimate citizens were being born, so he made it illegal to delay remarriage. Anyone who didn't remarry within 2 years of being widowed or within 18 months of being divorced could suffer financial penalties. And Jews also regarded it as impious to remain single, because the first command in the Bible is, be fruitful and increase in number. If your marriage ended without the minimum of 2 children, you were expected to remarry. So both Roman and Jewish societies expected anyone who was divorced or widowed to remarry. Now, some people argue that remarriage isn't allowed in the New Testament because true divorce isn't allowed. That is, as Catholics argue, marriage has a sacramental permanence, like priesthood does. So once it occurs, it always exists in heaven's bureaucracy, even if divorce has taken place on earth. However, God does know about human sinfulness, and he allows victims to escape marriage. As Jesus affirmed, God allows this because of human hard-heartedness, the Old Testament term for unrepentant and repeated sinfulness. I deal with this in detail elsewhere. The New Testament doesn't explicitly forbid remarriage, but nor is there any clear permission or encouragement for it. Now, this is surprising because we'd expect there to be clear teaching on such an important issue. The most likely reason for this absence is that there's no need to teach Jewish or Gentile converts about it, because Christian teaching didn't oppose what they already knew. Roman law penalized those who didn't remarry, and Jewish religious law regarded you as impious if you didn't remarry. So both societies assumed you could remarry, in fact would, and without specific teaching, Christians would assume that they were allowed to. If Jesus or Paul had wanted to oppose this general assumption, they'd have to say so very clearly. But they weren't opposed to it, so they didn't need to say anything. Giving permission to remarry would be like telling believers that they were allowed to pay taxes. Actually, although Paul doesn't specifically write about remarriage after divorce, by a convoluted process we can uncover what he thinks about it. Because in 1 Corinthians 7:39, he quotes the wording of a standard Jewish divorce certificate. He says, "You are now free to marry anyone you wish." Now, Paul quotes this in relation to widows, not divorcees, so he isn't using it to state anything about divorce. He quotes this divorce certificate because Jewish law obliged childless widows to marry their brother-in-law in order to produce an heir, and he wanted to rescue widows from this obligation. So by quoting the divorce certificate, he invited his readers to reason, if a divorced person can marry whomever they wish, then surely a widow, who is often more vulnerable, should also be allowed this right. This reasoning is sound, and it's a wonderful release for widows who might otherwise have to marry someone they didn't like. For our inquiry, this is significant because this reasoning assumes that a divorcee can remarry. In other words, Paul never bothers to state that a divorcee can remarry, because there's no need for him to do this, but he does assume it. Also, he knew that his reasoning would only work if his fellow believers also assumed that remarriage was allowed. Now, this long and convoluted process of reasoning reveals to us what Jesus and Paul regarded as too obvious to state clearly, that someone with a valid divorce certificate is free to remarry. Now, was it worth going through all this mental gymnastics? Well, for someone who's divorced, the knowledge that remarriage is permitted is worth the extended brain work necessary to uncover this obvious answer. God bless.